Hi, I'm Marc, and on this channel I talk about Brexit and UK politics. At a discussion event organized by the Hans Seidel Foundation, that is close to the Bavarian CSU, at the beginning of October, HSS Chairman Markus Ferber, MEP, the former Parliamentary State Secretary in the Ministry of Interior, Construction and Community, Stephan Mayer, MDB, and the British foreign and security experts Sophia Gaston from Policy Exchange were present, and Evie Aspinall from the British Group Foreign Policy. And they agreed that closer, structured cooperation on security would bring great benefits for both sides here. Under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, relations between the United Kingdom and the European Union have noticeably improved compared to the time before, but it couldn't get worse. And last but not least, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the changed security situation have shown the need for closer cooperation. However, structured institutional cooperation between London and Brussels is not expected in the near future, and that for political reasons. While his predecessors Boris Johnson and Liz Truss distinguished themselves as hardliners with sharp rhetoric against the EU, Rishi Sunak, who supported Brexit early on, is choosing a less confrontational tone as Prime Minister, at least towards the EU. In his recent speech at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, he reiterated that Brexit would have given the United Kingdom new freedoms that should be used. Well, however, as a brief sentence in a nearly 60-minute speech, it was little more than a shout-out to the party's Eurosceptic base. In fact, since taking office almost a year ago, Sunak has invested political capital in improving relations with Brussels and European partners. The signing of the so-called Windsor Framework Agreements in the spring, which facilitated the movement of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and diffused the dispute over the Northern Ireland Protocol somewhat, paved the way for better relations with the European partners, but also for the USA. At the signing, EU Commission President von der Leyen extended an invitation to the UK to join the EU Science Cooperation Programme Horizon, which the British government finally accepted in September, after a lot of complaining, of course. And King Charles's state visit to Berlin and Paris, the first foreign trips of his reign, a British-French government summit, and an offer to host the next meeting of the European Political Community underlined Sunak's government's willingness for closer ties. The Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, a changed security situation in Europe, and last but not least, increasing migration flows also contributed to the rapprochement. Although it was part of the political declaration as part of the withdrawal agreement, foreign and security policy did not become part of the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. The cooperation is therefore largely ad hoc and more on a bilateral basis. National security, and especially the security of its own citizens, is a priority for every government, explained Stephan Mayer. Therefore, even in the most difficult phases of Brexit negotiations, he was always convinced that cooperation in the area of security was possible despite tense relations. And Sophia Gaston reported on the frustration of British decision-makers that security cooperation with the EU was so politically charged, even though it was about their own national security. However, she observes that the mood in government circles has changed and that all cooperation opportunities with the EU are being pursued, at least behind closed doors, especially those that are easy to achieve. And Markus Ferber pointed out in his opening speech that cross-border threats from extremism and terrorism, organized crime and drug and human smuggling required cross-border cooperation between EU member states and the UK. This has become more difficult since Brexit because, as a third country, the UK no longer has the same access to security databases and is not a member of the European Police Authority Europol. The British government has concluded a separate agreement with Europol, yes. According to reports, another agreement will soon be signed with the European Border Protection Agency Frontex, which will make it easier to combat criminal people smuggling networks. Sunak, who has called for a the stop the boats thing, knows that he will depend on European partners to achieve this goal. As the European political community meeting in Spain last week, Sunak called on his European partners to do more to combat organized crime linked to illegal migration and presented an 8th resolution together with Italian Prime Minister Meloni, the EU Commission and other heads. It's another 8 points plan, I mean. At the EPG meeting, Sunak also reaffirmed his government's commitment to European security and called for more support for Ukraine. Speakers at the mentioned HSS event also agreed that the UK has played a leading role in supporting Ukraine and has therefore played a crucial role in keeping Europe together in the face of this Russian aggression. No other EU state can boast not only the military capabilities of the British but also those of their secret services. That is why many smaller EU member states, for example in the Baltics and Scandinavia, sought closer defense cooperation with the British. The two leading EU states, France and Germany, are viewed with suspicion, especially in Eastern and Central Europe. This is also why it is in the interest of the EU and its member states to cooperate closely with the UK in this area. And there are also a number of opportunities for cross-border cooperation in development and production in the area of industrial defense cooperation, which is under pressure to increase capacities in the context of military support for Ukraine. However, the moderator of the event, Charles Grant, interjected that the dispute over export checks between Germany and the UK, currently in the delivery of Eurofighter jets to Saudi Arabia, which Germany wants to prevent, shows the limit of this cooperation. Yeah, if you have a German government like ours, yes. However, there are plenty of other areas, including space, where bilateral and multilateral cooperation is indeed possible. For the HSS panel, the specter of a possible renewed presidency of Donald Trump and a consequent reduction in US military and financial support for Ukraine and European security was another reason for London and European partners to come together. Although Evie Aspinall was optimistic, "We survived Trump once, we will survive him again," she said, other panelists were more skeptical. Sophia Gaston expressed concern that neither London nor other European capitals were seriously considering what another Trump presidency would mean. Well, at least it would mean his last, I say. All speakers agreed that a second Trump administration would be much more professionally organized and therefore potentially pose a greater threat to alliances such as NATO. And Markus Ferber also sees the failing political system in the USA as a danger that Europeans should not underestimate. Despite all the reasons for closer cooperation between the British government and the EU, and not just in the area of security, the British experts in particular agreed that such structured institutional cooperation cannot be expected in the foreseeable future, especially for political reasons. Prime Minister Sunak may take a more pragmatic approach to the EU than his predecessors, knowing that this is the only way he can achieve many of his own government goals, including a better economy and a solution to the migration problem. However, he acts in a goal-oriented manner and relies on concrete results in the form of specific agreements that he can convey to the British voter as a success and in the British interest. Further rapprochement or institutionalized cooperation would hardly be possible politically, especially not within their own conservative ranks. The Labour Party has already announced that following a possible election victory in 2024, it will seek closer relations with the EU, including in the areas of foreign and security policy. In the summer, they announced that they wanted to cooperate more closely, especially with Germany in the area of defense on a government contract. Elections on the island are expected to take place in autumn 2024, when the new EU Commission has only just been constituted after the European elections in June, and relations with the United Kingdom are probably not a top priority at that moment. The crucial moment for relations between London and Brussels will be the review of the Cooperation and Trade Agreement in early 2025. Only then it will become clear whether both sides, possibly with new personnel, will open a new chapter and are ready for closer institutional cooperation. And if you want to know more right now, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.